in communication and in sales, you need to care about what people think to a certain extent. But you can't overdo this either, right? On the one hand, if you care too much about what people think, you're walking around on eggshells and you can't express yourself the way that you want. On the other hand, if you don't care about what people think, then you're just doing whatever regardless of what your environment thinks or feels, which is not a good thing either, right? So this is why you need to balance, and that's what I want to share to you in my video today with some experiences I had. So I was walking around here today, and my goal was to do some cold approaches, right? So I'm both in cold approach and sales. Lately I'm working more in sales, but in the past I've done a lot of cold approaches here. And for me, this was an exercise in like expressing myself and becoming more free. So back then I was doing like all kinds of silly stuff that I kind of regret. Not all of it, but some of it. Just to feel more confident about myself and just so that I could express myself freer and feel better, right? And this is what happened after doing this, after exercising this for several years. I became freer, I had less anxiety, and I just felt better about doing what I want. But the side effect of that was I became kind of like awkward. People couldn't relate to me. And this is why you need to care what people think. This is why you need to be able to calibrate, right? And this is taught in both cold approach and sales, but this is something I see more in sales, because in sales, if you can't calibrate, you're dead, right? Like, it's a professional environment. You're speaking to business owners. They want someone. You don't necessarily need to be posh, but you very clearly need to know what you're saying. And in cold approach, that's not the same way, right? You still need calibration in cold approach, but when you're just going about socially, especially when you're just doing it for more like a party style, then you still need to calibrate to the feelings, but you could just kind of do whatever and be crazy, and people wouldn't care too much. Now in business and in sales, it's very different, right? There is still the balance you need to have even in sales, right? But it's much more fine-tuned. And doing sales now for 2 years really enabled me to calibrate better, not just to the feelings, but also just like kind of knowing what people kind of like expect, the way normal people behave. Even though I don't think I'm great at that, but I do know like it's important to calibrate to how people feel and how people expect others to behave. So you kind of learn that, especially in sales. So that's one thing I really learned in these 2 years. And then also coming back out of sales and like doing some cold approaches now and then, it's really difficult for me because I'm so, and this is like maybe on one level it's a good thing, because I'm so used to wanting to calibrate now that like I don't want to fuck things up, and I don't want people to reject me, and I don't want to even risk it. So this bites me back in the ass, because when you're doing cold approaches, of course you need to calibrate, but you need to just go, right? To a certain extent you need to just go. Like when you're in public here, everyone hears what you're saying anyway. It's going to be a little bit awkward. You need to just deal with that. So I still need to be able to calibrate, Because if I don't do that, then I go back to being awkward, and I don't want that. But at the same time, you need to be able to risk being a little bit awkward if you want to do a proper cold approach. That's just the thing, you know. And the more experience you get, the smoother you become. I'm definitely not a smooth person, but some people become quite smooth at it. And definitely with experience it comes, but it's always, you know, it's always going to be a thing where you need to risk being a little bit awkward. So that's the thing. Now in sales, you can do that as well, but not as much, right? Because you need to appear professional. You need to know what you're saying. And you actually need to make like structured sentences in sales. Whereas in cold approach, you can just kind of say whatever and just go based on feelings. Because the end goal is just having a good interaction where you make a connection. And that's mostly based on feelings at the end of the day. So I think I learned a lot of that I can also apply in sales. But in sales, the words are much more important, because when you're speaking to business owners, there's a certain logic that you need to carry over to them. A certain, why is this going to make sense for them? And you can't just transfer that with feelings. That's why you need a good sales strategy as well, especially if you're selling B2B. But yeah, that's why I say you need to care what people think in a healthy way. You can't overdo it, and you can't completely not care either. Both are like bad approaches. So that's my experience. And now back when I'm doing cold approaches here, I want to kind of challenge myself to do as much cold approaches as possible. Not like in the past, not spamming approaches. But right now, I've been walking here for 5 hours and I only did 2 approaches. So like, and I did push myself. So I want to just kind of push myself to do as much approaches as possible, because I need to be able to risk awkwardness and risk rejection a little bit. At the same time, I still want to calibrate a little bit as well, you know, because otherwise I would become the awkward pickup artist, right? So, you know, I'm kind of thinking of how can I integrate this as well in my brand, because I don't want my brand to be about pickup. I don't want it to be about women. Maybe in the future a little bit, but I'm thinking like, how can I integrate this with business? Because I know a lot of business owners, you know, it's a strange thing. You know, women are seen as like a distraction in business oftentimes, especially pickup. So I definitely can see where that comes from. But at the same time, it is like something that's been very important to me. So I want to see how I can integrate it professionally so that my brand can appeal to both people who want to become more socially expressive, also not just in life, but also with women, and then also learn how to build a kick-ass business and how to become great at sales as well. So that's something I'm going to need to think about. But yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Give it a like if you liked it. Check out my next video if you want. I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.